Hey everyone, it's your average chess player here. Today we're going to look at this endgame position. It is white's turn to play. The board is facing this way. Feel free to pause the video here and try to find the best move for white and also the continuation. Skip ahead to the solution part of the video if you want to verify your solution or you just want the solution for the position. Stick around if you want me to see how I solved this position, what patterns I noticed, nuances that I saw, and how I finally stumbled upon the solution. So let's start. The plan for white here is simple. White wants to capture this pawn, black pawn, with the king and the rook. Both these pieces have to attack this pawn to capture it because the king is going to be sticking around. Black king is going to stick around to protect this pawn. And from black's perspective, black just wants to try and queen this pawn or maybe get a draw out of it. So that is the general plan both sides have. What challenges does white have in this position? One is the fact that black is going to queen his pawn in just 3 moves. And also the black king is in a nice position to kind of shoulder the white king away and not let the king come close to the pawn. So right now, if in this position white had to get to this pawn, it is 3 moves, but black will also like start moving his pawn. So white needs a lot of moves to get next to the black king and also get to the black pawn. So that is the position we are in. As for the candidate moves, before I started looking at candidate moves, I just wanted to throw in the most intuitive move that I could see, which is just king d3, just to see what happens. Sometimes just throwing in a move kind of helps you understand the position better. So king d3 is the first move. I want to get close to this pawn as soon as possible and eventually put my rook on g8 and take this pawn. After king d3, black can play just g3. And here I wanted to throw in a check with rook f8 with the idea that if black plays king g1, I can just play king to e2 and after g2, rook to g8, not putting the rook anywhere else and not moving the king, just rook to g8. Black is kind of running out of squares and we need the f2 square to double attack this pawn. So that's why rook g8, putting black in a zugzwang. After king h2, king f2, we catch up with this pawn finally, and you could queen, but I'm just going to take this, and this is an elementary checkmate with a rook and a king. So as soon as I saw this, I was happy that there's at least a checkmating pattern or a pattern to catch up to the pawn available in this position. So I went back to see if there are any moves that are not forced for black, and I came back to this position where I saw instead of king g1, black can play king e1, and putting the king on the g file voluntarily as black would actually make black lose a tempo. So if we saw in that variation with king g1, we spent a move as black to move away from g1 square to h2 in order to queen. So just from that standpoint, putting the black king on the g file in any of these scenarios doesn't make any sense anymore. So king e1 is the defensive resource, and after this, black can still queen with 2 moves, and there's nothing much white can do here. Even if I play rook g8, after king f1, we're going to queen, and if we try to delay it with rook f8, black is not going to go to g1 because that would result in the same position we saw earlier. Black is going to go to e1, and then it's just a draw. White has no way to progress, has to stick around on g8 to prevent this pawn from queening, and black will play king f1 again. So king d3 doesn't work for this reason, but we notice that black has a good resource with king e1 for some such situations, and we also notice that there's a way to catch up to the black pawn, but now we need to see how we can get to that position. So king d3 doesn't work. What are the other candidate moves that we have here? I want to try moves with my rook first. We have rook a2, rook f8. Both are checks that we can do. Rook g8 feels a bit pointless because you can just keep moving the pawn ahead, and even if you try to bring in the king, king e1 is the resource that we saw. So just to quickly put that on the board, after g3, let's say king d3, and g2, even if I do rook f8, I have this, again, this nagging move of king e1, and we reach the same position as before after this continuation. Like I can queen here, which is king e3 doesn't work. So after rook g8, king f1, it's just the same thing. So we'll go back. So rook g8 isn't great. After rook a2, I wanted to see can I do anything here. King g1 and king g3 both again, like logically, like we saw earlier, it just makes us lose a tempo, doesn't really help us. King e3 is a nice move that I wanted to try with black because it kind of shoulders the white king, preventing it from getting to the pawn. And after a move like rook a3, king f2, now I'm trying to bring the king inside with d3, g3, rook a2 check, not king g1 again because of the same reasons that I told earlier. King f3 is a nice move here, and black, and there's not much white can do here. I have to play rook d4 to even give a check, but after g2 and a move like this, we're gonna queen, and this position is a draw. So rook a2 doesn't work either. So in all these positions, it is clear in a way that black has this access to this e3 square, e1 square, even e2, and is able to shoulder the white king away effortlessly, and is always has just 3 moves to queen, and it isn't giving us enough time to move our king closer and get to the black king. So which means we might have to gain a tempo here and kind of put black in a series of zugzwangs in a way where all the moves that black does is kind of going to be losing. So we need to start off with a sequence of moves like that. So we already saw our candidate moves, all our candidate moves kind of fizzle out with king d3. The only move that was left to analyze is rook to f8 check. With rook to f8, black has probably just two options to play. None of these options seem like a good move, g3, g2 and g1, for the same reason I told earlier, where if the black king gets in front of his own pawn, it is going to make him lose a tempo, and we already saw how that ends. King e1 is going to be a problem because after like rook to g8, there's no way to catch up to this pawn for the black king. So that is already a problem. And it's also good to see that rook g8 kind of forces, the threat of rook g8 kind of forces the black king to be available to get to f3 or f4 and not really move around that much with the king. Even king g1 has the same problem of rook g8. So let's say a move like king e3. It kind of shoulders the white king away, and now we are like now threatening to start queening. But just like how we saw after king e1, rook g8 is a threat. Rook g8 is still a threat. And we are now kind of forcing the black king to protect this pawn with king to f3. And we have reached a nice, kind of a critical position to just understand what happened here, right? If the black king was on f2, and if it was black's turn to play, black would have just played g3, like it would have been similar to the position where we played rook g8 first. But black is on f3 and not f2, which means black has to use 1, 2, 3 and also put his king on f2 in order to queen this pawn. Now with the king was on f2, it was just 3 moves, now it is 4. So we gained a tempo that way. But also what we have, because of why like black has to spend that extra move, we can now move our own king and spend a tempo that way. Previously we couldn't do that because the king was already on f2 and he could start queening the pawn immediately, but now that is no longer the case. Now black can play any number of moves here, but if black plays king g3, voluntarily putting the king in front of the pawn, we can just play king e3, and black is running out of moves, cannot go to g2 or h2 because rook takes g4. So king h3 is kind of forced, and after king f4, g3, we can just take this pawn. And this is an elementary rook and king checkmate. If here black plays g3, what do? We already have kind of a barrier around this king. Now, what is black's threat here? That is the important thing. Black is threatening to play king f2 and get into that position we saw earlier where he can get to e1 with the pawn on g3 and kind of play around and draw the position. So that is what black would try to do eventually if the rook was not on g8. So to prevent that, we just have to play rook f8 check now. So there are no squares here in this file. So there's just 2 squares left. let's say king g2, and now we have this move king e2, again preventing the black king from escaping, and now we are free to move this rook. Let's say king h2, still trying to queen this pawn. I wanted to play this move king f3 here. I think rook h8 is also a move here, which will work, but king f3, now you cannot move away from this pawn or to g1 or h1 because the pawn will be lost. You cannot play king h3 here because it's just rook h8 mate, just to put that on the board. So the only move that left is g2, and after rook h8 check, king g1, we're already attacking this pawn with our king, and just playing rook g8 and double attacking this pawn wins us the pawn next move, and this is again an elementary checkmate. Okay, so this is a winning continuation. This is a winning line. Have we covered all our bases? That's what we need to check. So let's just go back to a position where we can see there's an alternate. How about king g4 here? What happens with king g4? We can just play king e4, and then we are already like shouldering the king. Let's say king g5. I can even play something like rook g8 check. Now you can no longer have access to the g4 square. Let's say king h4. I can play even like king f3. I'm attacking this pawn, and this pawn is already lost. Like you cannot play king h3 because of mate, and if you move the king up, I just take, or I can take with this, whatever we want to do. So that is not a winning position. So let's go back to see if there's anything else. Here instead of king f3, if you play king f4, I can still play king d3. If you play g3, I have rook g7 because black's in a zugzwang again now. Has to protect this pawn, cannot move away. If he moves away, it takes, and this king f3 is the only move, and this is pretty much similar to the position we saw after the check. You either go to either of these squares, and it's a winning endgame. And here instead of g3, if you try to play king f5, I can simply play king e3 and again put you in a zugzwang. This, you literally have run out of squares to protect this pawn, and after you move, I just take this, and this is a winning endgame. Yeah, this is a nice endgame. What an endgame. It took me a while to understand why the move rook f8 actually works in this position, because after king e3, it didn't really seem like it was much. It didn't really seem like I achieved anything. But after I saw the fact that like if king something like king e1, which is the defensive resource that in the earlier version didn't work, because of rook g8, because the king is too far away, I realized I can insert rook g8 here, and after king f3, king d3, I realized that black is running out of squares, and we have gained that one additional tempo to get closer to the black king. So yeah, if you skipped ahead to this part of the video just to see the solution, here's the solution for you. The winning move and the only move here is rook to f8 check. And after this, no matter what black does, let's say king e3 is the variation we saw in the video, we can play this nice move rook g8, trying to attack this pawn and tying down this black king after king f3 to this pawn here. And now we get the time to play king d3. Black has lost his tempo. If the black king on f2, and if it was black's turn to play here, black will just start queening the pawn, but the black king is on f3 and not f2. So now black plays g3 after rook f8 check, forcing the black king to one of these two squares. Let's say king g2, king e2, again preventing the king from escaping, and now we are free to move the rook wherever we want to. King h2, and then we play king f3, which is kind of restricting the king further, cannot go to these squares. If you go to h3, it is rook h8 mate, so g2 is the only move left. And after this, we just give this check on h8, king to g1. We are already attacking this pawn with our king, and then rook g8, and we win this pawn after king h2 and rook takes g2, and this is an elementary checkmate. And that's it. If you like this video, leave a like on this video. If you like content like this, subscribe to this channel. Catch you guys in the next one.